Welcome to the Deep Dive, brought to you by My Mind MashUps. If you're trying to cut through all the noise and just get to the insights that really matter, well, you're in the right place. Today, we are taking a truly essential deep dive. It's a topic that honestly touches every single corner of America, often in ways we don't fully see. We're going to pull back the curtain on the really profound economic costs of systemic racism in the U.S. And just as importantly, maybe more importantly, reveal the astounding financial benefits that could open up for everyone if we actually dismantle these barriers. You might find the numbers, well, frankly, pretty staggering.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we say everyone, we really do mean everyone. The core idea we're exploring today, is that systemic racism isn't just a moral issue, which, let's be clear, it absolutely is, but it's also a huge economic catastrophe. And when we talk about systemic racism, we're not just talking about like individual prejudice.
Right.
We're looking at how policies, institutions, even practices that seem neutral on the surface can, intentionally or not, create and just keep these racial gaps going in economic outcomes, affecting everything from, your home's value to whether you can get a loan for a business.
And the scale of this, it's hard to wrap your head around.
The numbers are just undeniable. Citigroup did some really deep research on this. They found that over the past 2 decades alone, to 20 years, systemic racism has cost the U.S. economy something like $16 trillion.
16 trillion.
Yeah. It's almost too big to picture. I mean, imagine wiping out the entire economy of Canada, Mexico, and Australia combined. That's the kind of hit we're talking about over just 20 years.
Wow.
And if you look back even further, the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank, they estimated the cumulative cost just from labor market disparities between 1990 and 2019. Something like $70.8 trillion.
70.8, that's astronomical. Citigroup put it really powerfully. They said it's like a tariff levied on us all, an unseen tax on prosperity. And our whole economy has been paying it for way too long.
Okay, 16 trillion is a huge number.
Yeah.
But can you maybe give us one tangible example? Like, how does that directly impact an average American, maybe someone who doesn't think they're affected by discrimination?
Sure. Think about it like this. That $16 trillion isn't just, money that vanished. It means less innovation, fewer new products, fewer new services. It means fewer job opportunities in your community. It means less tax revenue coming in for public services.
So like schools, roads.
Exactly. Less money for your local schools, less investment in your town's infrastructure, maybe fewer choices when you go shopping. It's like this massive weight holding back the entire economy. And when the whole economy is held back, eventually that touches everyone's wallet one way or another.
Right, okay. And what's really compelling then is the flip side. What's the potential gain if we actually start fixing this? Oh, the potential is just immense. It's really about revitalization. So if we could actually close these pervasive racial inequality gaps, the economists at Citigroup, they estimate that roughly $5 trillion could be added to the U.S. GDP just through 2025.
$5 trillion in just a few years.
Yeah. And then there's a separate McKinsey study. They figured our GDP could be up to 6% higher by 2028 if we just close the racial wealth gap. So look, this isn't just about getting back what we lost. It's about unlocking a future that's way more prosperous than what we have now. We get back everything we've been missing and probably then some.
Okay, so for our deep dive today, we're going to walk through the main economic areas where systemic racism has really hit hardest, right? Like housing, business.
Exactly. Housing, entrepreneurship, education, the labor market, criminal justice, healthcare. We'll look at the costs in each.
And then, crucially, we'll explore how dismantling these barriers isn't just, the right thing to do morally, but how it would unleash these massive economic gains for all of us. And we're basing this on serious economic data, policy analysis, but also the real stories behind those numbers. So yeah, let's dig in. Okay, let's start by maybe grounding ourselves in a bit of the history here, because this isn't new, right? Systemic racism has been kind of baked into America's economic setup for a long, long time.
Oh, absolutely. It's fundamental. You can trace it, like you said, from the auction block straight through to, redline city blocks in the 20th century.
Can you give us some examples of those policies?
Sure. Well, for generations, you had federal housing programs like the FHA explicitly redlining black neighborhoods. They literally drew lines on maps, marking them as too risky for investment. This basically choked off access to mortgages, to credit.
So people couldn't buy homes?
Exactly. It prevented black families from building home equity, building wealth, in the way that, frankly, white Americans were encouraged to do, often with government help. And then think about the GI Bill after World War II. Huge boost for veterans, right? but it largely excluded Black service members from getting those same educational and housing benefits.
I didn't realize it was that explicit.
Oh, yeah. And then you add in things like the dispossession of Black-owned farms, persistent discrimination in hiring, keeping qualified people of color stuck in low-wage jobs. And the key thing is, these aren't just, sad stories from the past. Their economic ripples are still hitting us right now. They're still undermining our present, creating this drag on the whole economy.
So this legacy, especially something like redlining, it's not theoretical. It's actually visible in, family bank accounts today. What does that wealth gap look like now?
It's incredibly stark. Today, the median white household holds nearly 10 times more wealth than the median Black household. 10 times. In Federal Reserve data, it showed that between 1995 and 2016, white households' net worth grew, on average, by about 43%, up to around $61,200. Black families' net worth over that same period, basically flat, around $35,400. It barely moved.
And that's not just accidental?
No, not at all. It was forged by decades of unequal access, property, education, capital. And what's really kind of tragic is how persistent it is. Redlining might be illegal now, sure, but studies show the effects are still there. Those formerly redlined neighborhoods, they often still have lower home values today. Which means less property tax revenue, which often means underfunded schools in those same neighborhoods. So you trap generation after generation in this cycle of fewer opportunities. It's a massive misallocation of human potential, and it holds back the whole economy.
That makes the next point, housing, even more critical. Homeownership, it's seen as, the cornerstone of the American dream, but you're saying it's been systematically denied. What are the real financial costs there?
Well, think about how you buy a house. You need a mortgage, right? But for a lot of aspiring Black homeowners, that's where the dream hits a wall. Black applicants across the country are about 1.7 to 1.8 times more likely to get denied a mortgage compared to, all home buyers.
1.8 times? Even with similar finances?
Often, yes. Look at 2020 data. The mortgage denial rate for Black applicants was around 27.1%. For white applicants, it was 13.6%. That's roughly double.
37%.
Yeah. Think about what that means. Even if you have a similar credit score, similar income, a Black family is just far more likely to hear no from the bank. And these aren't just statistics, right? Each denial is a dream put on hold. A family unable to build that foundation of wealth.
So what's the wider impact of that? What does the overall home ownership gap look like?
The fallout is huge, especially for building wealth over time. Only about 44% of Black households own their home. Compare that to white households, it's around 74%.
74 versus 44, that's a 30-point gap?
A massive 30-point gap. And it's barely budged in decades. So when Black families can't buy homes, they miss out on rising property values, on that stability. And crucially, they miss out on the chance to pass that wealth, that asset, down to their kids. It breaks that chain of intergenerational wealth transfer and the broader economy. It misses out on all the spending that comes with buying a home, construction, furniture, appliances, you name it.
And Citigroup actually crunched the numbers on how much the housing market itself lost because of this, didn't they?
They did, and it's a stunning figure. Their analysis found that over the last 20 years, the U.S. housing market lost about $218 billion in sales, just because qualified Black applicants couldn't get home loans.
$218 billion.
Billion. Just think about that. That's money that wasn't spent on building homes, on renovations, on local taxes. Those are construction jobs that never happened. Local businesses that missed out on sales. All because potential homeowners of color were kept out of the market.
And it doesn't stop at getting the loan, right? There's appraisal bias, too.
That's another layer, absolutely. Homes in majority Black neighborhoods are consistently undervalued, cumulatively by about $162 billion. You hear these just heartbreaking stories. Black homeowners literally having to remove family photos, having white friends pretend to own the house during an appraisal just to try and get a fair valuation. It's absurd.
So tackling this, ending racism in housing, it's not just about fairness, it's about injecting hundreds of billions back into the economy, sparking construction, retail, creating jobs that help everyone in the community. Is that the idea?
That's exactly it. When families can buy homes, they invest. They support local businesses, they pay property taxes that fund local services, they create stability. You'd see this surge in prosperity. More home sales, more construction, revitalized neighborhoods. It creates this ripple effect that genuinely benefits the whole community, not just the new homeowners. It's a collective win.
Okay, from housing, let's pivot to entrepreneurship, the engine of innovation, right? But how many great business ideas just never happen because of racism?
It's a really tough question to answer fully, but Yeah, the evidence suggests far, far too many. And one of the biggest hurdles is just getting capital,
Yeah.
getting the money to start.
Access to loans, you mean?
Exactly. Look at large banks. They approve something like 60% of loan applications from white small business owners.
Okay.
But for black owners, it's only 29%,
60 versus 29, that's less than half.
less than half. And it's often not because the businesses aren't viable. A big factor is that because of the wealth gap we talked about, entrepreneurs of color often have less personal or family wealth to put in, or fewer alternative sources of credit. So that bank loan becomes almost essential. It's so bad that you get this discouraged borrower effect. Around 27% of black business owners reported they didn't even apply for a loan because they just assumed they'd be rejected.
Wow, so potential job creators just give up before they even start.
Right. It's this silent, massive loss of potential.
And the economic cost of that lost potential, Citigroup put a number on that too, right?
Yeah.
And it was huge.
Staggering is the only word for it. Their analysis. Over the past 20 years, the U.S. economy missed out on $13 trillion in business revenue.
13 trillion.
With a T.
$13 trillion. Just because black entrepreneurs couldn't get the capital they needed to start or grow their businesses? I mean, put that in perspective. That's more than the entire annual GDP of China. Think of the millions of jobs it represents. Jobs that were never created.
Lost inventions, lost services.
Well, exactly. Lost solutions that could benefit all of us. And we know minority-owned firms are real engines for jobs. An older study from back in 2002 suggested that if these firms just had equal access, reached parity, they could employ 16 million more people and generate an extra $2.5 trillion in revenue. And that was years ago. Imagine the potential now.
So removing these barriers, it's not just about fairness to entrepreneurs. It's about unleashing this entrepreneurial boom that makes the whole economy more dynamic. Precisely. You get more competition, which usually means better products and lower prices for consumers. You get more innovation. You get a broader tax base supporting public services. One estimate suggested reaching parity could mean something like 757,000 new businesses, creating 6.3 million more jobs, pumping an extra $824 billion in revenue into local economies. That's hundreds of thousands of new storefronts, new technologies, new services. It's genuinely a loss for everyone when we don't invest in all our entrepreneurs, and a huge gain when we do.
Okay, let's shift to education. Every kid's potential is, precious. But it sounds like children of color are often getting shortchanged right from the start. What's the economic impact there?
It really is heartbreaking and economically foolish. Schools in predominantly minority neighborhoods often just have way fewer resources than schools in, say, more affluent white areas.
How big is that gap?
Well, one study looking at 2016 found that overwhelmingly white school districts received about $23 billion more in funding than predominantly non-white districts, even though they served roughly the same number of students.
23 billion per year.
Per year. That translates to, on average, over $2,000 more being invested in the education of a child in a mostly white district every single year. And look, this isn't just about fairness. We are actively squandering brilliance. Think of the kids who, if they had the same opportunities, could become doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs. We're leaving so much human potential undeveloped.
And I assume this gap continues into higher education and then into earnings.
It absolutely does. It's like a pipeline with leaks all along the way. Only about 31% of black adults have an associate's degree or higher. For white adults, it's 46%. Now that gap reflects denied opportunity, not a difference in ability, and it leads directly to an earnings gap down the line, funneling many black workers into lower paying jobs.
Is there a cost associated with that, the lost wages?
Yes. Citigroup researchers calculated that over the past 2 decades, black workers lost out on about $113 billion in potential wages, specifically because they couldn't get the college degrees they were qualified for and aspired to. And think bigger picture. One analysis found the U.S. economy is missing out on almost $1 trillion every year, about $956 billion annually, just because of these racial and economic gaps in who gets through college.
Nearly $1 trillion a year. Just from education gaps. That's incredible. So beyond the obvious moral reasons, what's the economic upside if we actually close these gaps?
Well, closing those education gaps could boost U.S. GDP by an estimated $542 billion a year, just from having a more productive workforce and more consumer spending power. Plus, think about the savings for taxpayers. About $33.7 billion less needed each year for safety net programs. Another $13.8 billion saved annually in criminal justice costs.
So it pays for itself, essentially.
Massively. One study even projected a cumulative GDP increase of $20.4 trillion by the year 2050 if we just close the educational achievement gaps. Imagine that. An America with an economy tens of trillions of dollars bigger, just fueled by unleashing a generation of talent that we're currently sidelining.
But even for people who get similar education levels, racism doesn't just stop there, right? It follows people into the workplace. Hiring discrimination, wage gaps, glass ceilings.
That's right. The barriers continue. We've all heard about those resume studies, right?
Yeah.
Where you send out identical resumes, just change the name to sound stereotypically black instead of white.
And the white names get more callbacks.
Significantly more. It happens over and over again in studies. This means companies are literally missing out on qualified candidates purely because of bias. This contributes directly to higher unemployment or underemployment rates for Black and Latino workers. Black unemployment has consistently been about double the white rate for decades now. It's a structural problem. And again, it's not just unfair to the individual. It's lost productivity, lost output that drags down the whole country's growth.
Can we put a number on that lost output, the cost of those labor market gaps?
We can try. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco estimated that racial and ethnic gaps in employment, education, earnings have cost the U.S. economy about $51 trillion in lost output since 1990.
51.
Trillion.
Since 1990.
Yeah, another source puts it even higher, maybe $70.8 trillion. Just looking at a single year, 2019, the economy was estimated to be $2.6 trillion smaller than it could have been, just because of these racial gaps in the labor market. It's like we're trying to compete globally with one hand tied behind our back.
And then there's the wage gap, even for people who are employed.
Right. Stark differences there too. Black women, for example, earn about 66.5 cents for every dollar earned by white men. And Black workers overall face this unexplained wage gap of around 14.9%, even after accounting for things like education and experience.
14.9%. Less pay for similar work.
Essentially, yes. And think about what that means in the real world. Imagine if every Black worker suddenly got a 15% raise. That's not just numbers. That's the difference between struggling and saving for millions of families. Just in 2023, estimates suggest Black women lost out on about $42.7 billion in wages because of this gap. Hispanic women, $53.3 billion.
And this obviously feeds right back into that wealth gap we started with. It's a cycle.
It's a vicious cycle, exactly. And breaking it would energize the whole economy. That McKinsey analysis, I figured closing the racial wealth gap could boost U.S. GDP by up to 6% by 2028. That's an extra $1.5 trillion in output.
Wow. And it's not just about pay, is it? Workplace culture matters too.
Hugely. Discrimination, bias, feeling excluded, it leads to higher turnover. One study estimated that cost businesses $172.4 billion over 5 years. Plus, there's lost productivity about $58.7 billion annually. And interestingly, it's not just the people being discriminated against who become less productive. Research shows that even non-minority employees slack off or become less engaged when they see the system isn't based on merit. It kind of poisons the well for everyone.
So the benefit here is what some people call an inclusion dividend, where fair hiring and diverse teams aren't just nice to have, they actually lead to better results.
Exactly that. An inclusion dividend. When you hire based purely on merit, you get the best talent, period. And diverse teams. They're consistently shown to be more innovative, better at problem solving, better at understanding diverse customers. It leads to better decisions, better products, a stronger bottom line. It's not just feel-good stuff, it's smart business. It's pure economic logic.
Okay, we have to talk about the criminal justice system. You called it an economic wrecking ball earlier, a pipeline away from productivity, especially for communities of color.
It really is.
Yeah.
Both a human tragedy and an economic catastrophe. Let's start with just the direct costs, running prisons and jails. The U.S. spends somewhere between, say, $80 billion and $89 billion a year just on that.
80 to 90 billion every year.
Every year. And that spending has skyrocketed. It grew like 3 times faster than education spending in recent decades. The total cost of the entire criminal justice system back in 2012 was already $265 billion. That's taxpayer money. Money that could be going to schools, healthcare, fixing roads, you name it.
And those are just the direct costs. The indirect costs are even bigger.
Oh, much bigger. When you factor in everything else, the lost earnings of people while they're incarcerated, the reduced wages they face for their entire lives after they get out because they have a criminal record, the impact on their families, the strain on communities. One study tried to tally it all up, the total economic burden, around $1 trillion a year.
$1 trillion.
Roughly 6% of our entire GDP, just wiped out. Think about the individual level. The unemployment rate for formerly incarcerated people is around 27%. That's depression-level unemployment. And on average, someone loses about $500,000 in potential lifetime earnings just by having been incarcerated once. $500,000 per person, just gone from the economy.
And the racial disparity here is absolutely central to understanding that massive cost, isn't it?
It's impossible to ignore. Black Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of white Americans, often for similar offenses. And look at sentencing. Black men get sentences that are, on average, 19.1% longer than white men for the same crimes.
19% longer.
For the same crime.
Yes. So think about this. If Black people and Hispanic people were incarcerated at the same rate as white people, our total prison population would drop by nearly 40%.
40%. Almost half. That tells you just how much this system has disproportionately targeted people of color. And the cost is enormous. Billions in prison spending, billions more in lost earnings from people who could be working, paying taxes, contributing.
So ending those racist disparities, it means more people working, fewer families broken apart, less strain on social services, more innovation. It sounds like lifting a huge weight off the economy.
A tremendous financial burden lifted off the entire country's shoulders. You redirect those resources, those human lives, towards positive, productive things. More people working, paying taxes, supporting families, starting businesses. Instead of being a massive cost to the state, it's an economic imperative just as much as a moral one.
Okay, let's turn to health, another area where racism has a huge impact, but maybe the economic costs aren't always obvious to people.
Yeah, this is often overlooked, but the economic drain is massive. One big study looked at racial and ethnic health disparities. The cost, about $451 billion in a single year, 2018.
$451 billion, just from health gaps.
Yep, and that was a 41% increase from just 4 years earlier. In 2014, it's getting worse, not better. That number includes things like excess medical costs, lost productivity from people being too sick to work, and the economic loss from people dying prematurely.
Wow, and if you add in education-related health gaps,
Then the total economic burden in 2018 was estimated at $1.377 trillion.
$1.3 trillion in 1 year from health disparities.
It's almost unbelievable. More than the entire annual economic output of Spain. Just gone, because we don't have health equity.
So what drives these huge costs? Is it just like doctors being biased?
That can play a role, sure, but it's much more systemic than that. Think about segregated neighborhoods, often a legacy of housing discrimination. These communities often face higher exposure to pollution, maybe they're food deserts with no access to affordable fresh food. Access to quality healthcare providers might be limited.
Right, all those factors add up.
They add up to higher rates of chronic illnesses, diabetes, hypertension, asthma. These are expensive to treat year after year. That drives up medical costs. But the biggest chunk of that trillion-dollar burden, about 2/3 of it, actually comes from premature deaths, people dying younger than they should.
So the economy loses their entire contribution.
Exactly. Their work, their skills, their spending, their innovation, just gone. When people die in their prime working years, it's a massive economic loss, besides being a human tragedy.
So ending racism in healthcare, it's literally about saving lives, saving money, and generating public wealth.
That's a perfect way to put it. Public health is public wealth. Eliminating these disparities would save incredible amounts of money. One estimate, over $230 billion in direct medical costs saved over 10 years, and maybe $1 trillion in those indirect costs, like lost productivity. Healthier people work more, they innovate more, they need fewer social services. It leads to longer, more productive lives for everyone. It's a fundamental investment in our people, our human capital.
So we've walked through housing, business, education, the workplace, justice, health. The picture seems really clear. Racism isn't just wrong, it's an economic disaster. But like you said, there's this huge opportunity hidden inside that reality.
A truly enormous opportunity for every single one of us. Imagine the positive cycle we could create, the one we've been missing. A family gets that home loan they were denied before. They build equity. Maybe they use that equity to help send a kid to college.
Right.
That kid gets a good education, gets a higher paying job. Maybe they start their own business, hire people. They pay more taxes, contributing to Social Security for retirees. That's the cycle of prosperity. But when you hold one group back, you break that cycle for everyone. Conversely, when you lift one group up, it really does tend to lift others too.
And you mentioned that Citigroup projection earlier, that massive potential boost to GDP. Remind us of that number.
Yeah, it's worth repeating. Citigroup projects that if the U.S. could actually eliminate these key racial disparities now, we could add an extra $5 trillion to our GDP just over the next 5 years.
$5 trillion in 5 years.
$5 trillion. It's like finding an economic gold mine that was buried in plain sight. All we have to do is the right thing. Those gains would come from higher productivity, more innovation, a bigger consumer base, as millions who've been marginalized finally get to fully participate. This isn't about charity, it's just smart economics.
Okay, so the question a listener might have is, look, this sounds bad for people of color, but how does fixing it really benefit me if I'm white? What's the answer?
The answer is, it benefits you in almost every way imaginable. Think about it. A more educated workforce overall. That means companies have more talent to choose from. That leads to better products, better services for you as a consumer. And it makes American companies stronger globally.
More entrepreneurs.
More entrepreneurs means more businesses competing for your dollar. That usually means more choices, better quality, maybe lower prices. And it means more jobs created in your community, higher incomes across the board. That means more people spending money, boosting demand for everything, fueling growth that creates even more opportunities.
And the savings.
Yeah, fewer people living in poverty, fewer people incarcerated. That frees up billions in tax dollars. That money could go to improving infrastructure, funding research, maybe even tax cuts for the middle class, whatever our priorities are. We all gain when we live in a society where everyone can contribute fully. And honestly, society just feels more stable, safer, when there's greater equality. It truly is a rising tide that lifts all boats.
And looking beyond our borders, this makes the U.S. stronger globally too, right?
Absolutely. We're in a global race for talent, for innovation. Why would we sideline huge chunks of our own population? It makes no sense. As the U.S. becomes more diverse, minorities are projected to be the majority by 2044. Embracing that diversity fully is key to staying competitive. We want the next Einstein, the next great inventor, the next visionary CEO to come from here, regardless of their background. That drives our economy forward for everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the economic case for ending racism seems just overwhelming. The evidence is clear. Racism hasn't just been a moral stain, it's been this devastating drag on America's prosperity. A self-inflicted wound, really. Those numbers we talked about, trillions lost, billions drained every year, they aren't just abstract figures, they represent real things. Songs never sung, inventions never made, businesses never opened, lives never lived to their full potential.
Exactly. And while yes, the heaviest burden has absolutely fallen on Black and brown Americans, the truth is, it has hurt all Americans by making our entire nation less wealthy, less innovative, less vibrant than it could be. But here's the hopeful part. If human choices, policies, prejudices created this mess, then different human choices can fix it. We have the power to change this. The future isn't predetermined. We can choose a path where our diversity is truly seen as our greatest strength. Every kid who gets a great education, every entrepreneur gets that loan, every worker hired and paid fairly, every family building wealth, every person staying healthy and free. Each one of those isn't just a win against racism, it's a win for the American economy.
So picture that future America, maybe a decade or two from now, an economy potentially tens of trillions of dollars larger because growth is inclusive. But not just bigger, better, more stable because prosperity is shared more widely, more innovative because we're using all our brain power, more competitive globally, and fundamentally more just. It really does benefit everyone to end racism. And now we have the numbers to actually prove it. So maybe as you go about your day, just mull over how these ideas might challenge how you previously thought about economic growth and recognize that ending racism, it's not just a moral issue. It really is the path to a brighter, much more prosperous American future.
For all of us. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you found this conversation valuable, please take a moment to like, share, and follow My Mind MashUps wherever you get your podcasts or content. You can find us on Amazon Music, Audible, Facebook, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and YouTube. We really appreciate the support, and we'll be back with another deep dive very soon.